This is it, meeting day in Singapore, where President Trump and Kim Jong-un are about to sit down for a one-on-one talk with no one else in the room except for translators. Trump and Kim have both arrived. Dennis Rodman is on hand. They call him the Worm. And Trump has said he'll be able to feel out quickly whether the effort will succeed.
I think within the first minute, I'll know. Just my touch, my feel. That's what I do.
Somehow, though, that touch and feel failed to predict a disastrous ending to the G7 summit over the weekend, which began with this kind of talk about Trump's fellow world leaders.
We have a great relationship. Angela and Emmanuel and Justin, I would say the relationship is a 10.
Just hours later, though, Trump abruptly pulled his support from a joint statement the seven nations had negotiated, a move the president said was in response to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's, quote, false statements at a news conference. There were some tense moments between the leaders captured on camera earlier in the weekend as well, but the president is approaching his next challenge with great optimism. I'm joined now by Catherine Moon, a political science professor at Wellesley College and non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute Center for East Asia Policy, and Jim Walsh, a senior research associate at MIT's Security Studies program, who's been involved in past nuclear discussions in Iran and North Korea. Thank you both for being here.
Good to be with you.
So we got to start with the G7 before we turn our attention to North Korea. Let's take a look at what Justin Trudeau said right after the summit wrapped up, and then how one of the president's aides, Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, responded.
It would be with regret, but it would be with absolute certainty and firmness that we move forward with retaliatory measures on July 1st. I have made it very clear to the president that it is not something we relish doing, but it is something that we absolutely will do, because Canadians, we're polite, we're reasonable, but we also will not be pushed around.
There's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door.
Jim Walsh, let me start with you. I have trouble watching Trudeau's very mild-mannered statements, which are like statements he'd made before the G7 summit.
Sure.
And then that Peter Navarro analysis and squaring the two. Are you seeing a stab in the back in Trudeau's comments or something that would merit a special place in hell?
I'm still trying to imagine what that place in hell is for Canadians, and whether it's the same or different than the other places in hell that are. Obviously, it seems disproportionate and weird. But, and I can only speculate, but my guess is that the president heard this and reacted strongly to it, as he is prone to do.
Right?
And so his people have to come out and, defend him on TV.
Yeah,
but there didn't seem much there. And, we have enough problems in this relationship. I want to say, I was testifying before the House earlier this week and saying the single most important national security relationship the United States of America has had in the 20th and 21st century is our relationship with Europe, the Atlantic and the European lines. We fought in World War I. We fought in World War II. Lots of people died for that. And it's always been sacrosanct, the most important pillar. And between pulling out of the Iran deal, pulling out of the Paris Accords, and now this, real strain, I think.
Of course, we didn't even mention him saying that Russia should be back in. It should be
Right.
the G8.
Yes.
Kathy Moon, let me turn to you.
Sure.
I have seen various theories floated for why the president was so upset with Justin Trudeau. One of them, maybe tongue-in-cheek, maybe not, was the attention that his daughter got when she cast sort of seemingly adoring glances on Justin Trudeau back when he visited the United States in February. You remember that became a meme that a lot of people were having fun with. There's also, and I hadn't learned this until after the fact, Justin Trudeau presented Donald Trump with a picture of his grandfather's hotel at the summit, and that turned out to have been a hotel that was also a brothel. So people think that maybe Trudeau was making fun of the president. But there's this other explanation that Larry Kudlow suggested in remarks that he went on TV and made after the G7. Let's look at those.
POTUS is not going to let a Canadian prime minister push him around. He is not going to permit any show of weakness on the trip to negotiate with North Korea, nor should he.
In other words, he seems to be saying this is about looking strong in advance of the sit-down with Kim Jong-un. If that is what was driving the president, is there any merit to that approach, as you see it?
Absolutely not. For one, the words that have been thrown around in terms of someone will not be pushed over. I would say Kim Jong-un would feel that exact verbatim statement toward Donald Trump. I think if there's anyone who would take that phrase, it would be Kim Jong-un thinking to himself, Trump will not push me around. And what we know already is that Kim can play it very cool. He has been very savvy in a way nobody had expected throughout the last several months, doing diplomacy with the South Korean president twice now, a summit, as well as meeting with President Xi Jinping of China twice, meeting Putin recently. So this guy's on a roll, and he has been making it very clear that he is savvy and that he's not going to be pushed around.
So you're saying that by sending this message, the president could maybe inadvertently cause Kim to puff up his own chest?
He might.
Okay.
And also, the fact is that Mr. Trump has had trouble. He has trouble in the diplomatic arena. And that is not something that Kim Jong-un is not aware of. I would add to what Jim said before about the stupidity, utter stupidity of picking fights with our best friends, historical friends across the Atlantic and in north of us, Canada and Western Europe. These people also, many of the countries fought in the Korean War too.
That's right.
And so this is not just about, I'm going to do something fantastic and get a Nobel Prize in Singapore by talking with the dictator Kim Jong-un and leaving behind, sooner than he should have, the long-term allies. It's also, Trump is being very silly because if something were to work out diplomatically with North Korea, we have to get buy-in from around the world. For any kind of a real peace regime,
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
legally, we have to get buy-in, right? Yeah. Because they were part of the UN mission there, and they would have to help support economically North Korea. So the U.S. needs to be much smarter than we are.
Interesting wrinkle. Let me ask about what Trump and the U.S. might be looking to the international community to get buy-in on, successfully or not. I keep hearing that there are different definitions of denuclearization that are going to come into play here, with the U.S. thinking the word means one thing and the Kim regime thinking it means something else. What's the potential discrepancy here?
Okay, before I go any farther, I have to say this, though. So this summit, this is for international relations junkies. This is our royal wedding. This is, we won't have the crumpets or the hats. I might have a Singapore slang.
Wait, let me pull out my hat.
But, this is like our thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any bigger than this, right? And we don't know, I don't know if it's going to be a marriage or a one-night stand. That's sort of what we're asking ourselves. But this is as big as it gets. Never has there been a meeting like this. I mean, it's sort of incredible.
Thank you for adding to the hype factor.
I mean,
don't think I did my duty
we're
with
just
that.
sort of answering questions here. But my God, Donald Trump and, Chairman Kim are going to sit in a room by themselves, essentially. What could possibly go wrong? I think it's actually going to go well. I think it's going to go well, but you put your finger on the tough one, which is denuclearization. I don't think this is only about denuclearization. I think there are other positive things that can come from this summit. We've already got our detainees back. We can have a moratorium on tests.
But it could mean North Korea gets rid of all their nukes.
Yes.
No questions asked. Irreversible. They can allegedly
That's
never
not
do it again.
true anymore.
Okay.
Irreversible.
Not really.
No, go ahead. But, CIVID, complete, irreversible, verifiable denuclearization, that's a term from the 90s,
okay,
right? And we've had a lot of nuclear tests since then. But you're going to say about irreversibility, I have my doubts.
I'll just quickly say nothing in the nuclear world is irreversible once you have it. The genie's out of the bottle.
It's
so,
hard to be.
People have expertise.
Right,
yes.
and all we could do is hope that we can stop the speed and the trajectory of the nuclear program so that the costs are very high if they were to restart it at some point. Not that dissimilar to the situation in Iran, except that in North Korea, their know-how is just so much more advanced.
I think it's closer to South Africa, because South Africa had weapons and had to give them up. Iran never got weapons. So I think this is a project on that scale. So I agree with you. What we want to do is put North Korea on a political track that, even though it has some basic capability, it's not going to forget how to do this, right? Even though it has a basic capability, it makes a political decision. No, I'm going in this direction, not that direction. I'm going to stay nuclear free.
All right, so if that's one possible outcome of the summit, one possible approach for the U.S. to take, is it right or wrong to not bring up human rights? Because apparently the U.S. doesn't plan to.
Well, Trump did signal that he might bring up human rights. It depends on whom he talks to, because there are a lot of American NGOs that are pressuring members of Congress, and members of Congress are pressuring Trump, etc. He also told Prime Minister Abe of Japan that he would raise the Japanese abductee issue, which is a human rights issue, the biggest issue for the Japanese vis-a-vis North Korea outside of the nuclear weapons. But I think in this round, and I would hope that this could be one of perhaps a few rounds at high levels between the North Koreans and the Americans. But in this round, I think it's really about taking the temperature, checking to see how strong a handshake the two leaders can make, whether they can joke and get along. It is really not about putting specific policy issues on the table, except verifying Kim Jong-un's political will to work toward denuclearization and toward integration with the rest of the world.
You mentioned, I can't remember the exact phrase used, but you talked, I think, in a less than impressed way about President Trump's diplomatic skills at the outset of our conversation. But I got to ask you both, watching the president on North Korea has been very confusing, sometimes frightening. The summit was on, then it was off, then it was on again. He's bragging about the size of his nuclear button vis-a-vis Kim's. He's also saying, I think we have some video of him with the little rocket man infamous soundbite. Let's take a look at that, just for the heck of it.
We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
How do you get from threatening the total destruction of a country to saying you have great chemistry with their leader and going for a sit-down that everyone's all excited about? And as mind-bending as it is, does the president maybe deserve some credit for this sort of diplomacy as mayhem approach that has gotten him to this point?
Well, I'm a very practical person. If it works, then I think it will have been a good thing. I mean, I give the president credit for this. The traditional way is bottom up, right? You work through the bureaucracy, and then at the very end, you bring in the big guys, big women, men, to sign the final deal that's been all worked out. But the bureaucracy never produces anything, right? They're all risk averse. So sometimes in international relations, you've got to start with the top two and work down, and he deserves credit for that.
Kathy Moon, last word. Do you have any chance that he might be just the guy for this particular problem?
I think right now he's the guy because Kim Jong-un wants to meet him. It's very simple. Also, both of them have huge egos. They love the limelight, and they both want to make a big splash. And except the difference is that Kim Jong-un has been doing his homework for years now. And that worries me. So being in a room by themselves with just translators, Kim's going to have facts in his head, and he's rehearsed. Mr. Trump, not so much.
We got to leave it there. Kathy Moon, Jim Walsh, thank you both.
Thank you.